We have more for your ears only. I'm Katherine Herzog.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. I'm a little obsessed with fertilizer. That's a quote from Bill Gates' new column in Wired magazine, raising some questions about his value in the new role as product and technology advisor to new Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. Also last week, Twitter reported that difficulties in usage were cutting the rate of new user growth, leading to a fall in share value by as much as 18%. Now this.
We have been tasked to find and protect art that the Nazis have stolen.
Well, the chaps are all very anxious to get started. We have your architect from Chicago, a sculptor, a director of design at the School of Fine Arts, and a few other experts in various fields of art.
How the fellas making out?
Like Olympians.
The dashing George Clooney leads a Hollywood A-list in the newly released film The Monuments Men. Based on a true story, the film follows an unlikely and unprecedented World War II crew of art experts following frontline troops to rescue priceless masterpieces from Nazi looters. Originally meant to keep castles, churches, and chateaux from harm in the fray, they tracked, located, and ultimately returned more than 5 million stolen artistic and cultural items.
And the search for Nazi-looted art continues today. Recently, some 1,400 works were discovered in a Munich apartment owned by a family that included one of the art dealers favored by the Nazis. The German government estimates that hundreds of these works may have been looted from Jews, but they are only a small portion of the estimated 20 million objects stolen by the Nazis, much of it never recovered. New York attorney Owen Pell has long been involved in cases seeking the return of Holocaust-looted art and also knew one of the real-life Monuments Men, Ken Lindsay, a former professor of art history at Binghamton University. And to talk more about the film and the facts, then and now, for your ears only, Owen Pell is on the line. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, David.
First, tell us if you've seen the new film and what you thought of its accuracy.
I have seen it, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that George Clooney did a wonderful job, much like in Good Night and Good Luck, in sort of boiling a very sprawling and complicated story down to a very approachable and human scale. And I think the film is very accurate.
How did the real Monuments Men know where to look? What were they looking for, and what were they finding?
Well, you have to remember, they were art historians and museum curators, and the world was a smaller place then, and there was a real community of people across countries who knew each other. And remember that as opposed to the small group you saw in the movie, there was a unit behind them who was doing a lot of research, and especially tapping into the American OSS, British intelligence, and resistance sources. They were awash in data. I mean, the Allies knew by 40-41 that looting was going on, and by 1943, the Allies actually issued a declaration, which they broadcast on the radio and they put in print, telling the Nazis, we know you're looting and we're going to come and get the stuff back.
You've written that most people understandably associate the Holocaust with monumental loss of life and not so much the Nazis' attempted destruction of a whole Jewish culture. Talk about how the real Monuments Men brought greater attention to this and at least equal injustice of the war.
Well, I think that's an excellent question, David. You know, the Monuments Men really understood that the war was about Western civilization, not only in terms of the conquest of nations, in terms of Nazism being the cancellation of all freedom, but they understood it was about culture, that it was about civilization, that the Nazis literally wanted to reshape history into their own twisted version, which included literally wiping out any cultural evidence that certain races ever existed. And they really understood that, being people who were educated in art history and culture and who worshipped the Western canon. And so for them, art was worth dying for because they knew what it stood for. It stood for more than just the picture on the canvas. It was about civilization and society, and how are you going to rebuild a society if everything that came before it has been wiped away culturally?
What can you tell us about the actual Monuments Men veteran you knew, Ken Lindsay, and the particular expertise that he brought to the mission?
Well, Ken was the consummate art historian. He was an expert art historian and an antiquities expert. He had been an intelligence officer cracking codes in England late in the war, but heard about the Monuments Men and applied for the unit, and he was ultimately transferred to the unit as the war was ending. Ken then, in effect, picked up where the movie left off. He was in Wiesbaden, And he was one of the people sorting those 5 million pieces of art that they were finding in these that they were pulling together in these giant collection centers. And so every day he was going to work looking at works of art and trying to figure out what country they should be returned to. And one of his more famous finds was a bust of the Egyptian Empress Nefertiti, which he worked very hard to make sure was returned to the West German art collection.
What originally got you interested in this issue, and what's your most notable case?
I was working on a lot of Holocaust reparation cases in the late 1990s, and it turned out that one of my partners was from a family whose art was looted by the Nazis in France during the war, the Rosenberg family, and I assisted the family in getting back a work of art that turned up in the United States. It turned up based on a book written by Hector Feliciano called The Lost Museum, which focuses on the looting in France. And Feliciano literally had a slide picture, an old slide picture of the work of art in his book as one of the illustrations. And at a book signing ceremony, someone came up to him and said, "I know where that picture is," and was able to tell us where it was in a museum in Seattle. And I helped the family with that litigation, which ultimately did get the work back, but it took many years. And the family had a remarkable amount of documentation tracing the work of art along its looting path in Europe. And so that really got me interested.
Attorney Owen Pell is a partner at the law firm White & Case, LLP in New York.
Mussorgsky's Pictures in an Exhibition, and this has been For Your Ears Only.